بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Inshallah ta'ala, let's get started inshallah. Can everyone online hear me? If you're about to pray salah, please pray salah in the overflow room, inshallah ta'ala. Jazakallah khair. Okay, everyone online can hear me as well. Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. So inshallah ta'ala, today we are going to talk about zakat. We're going to talk about the fiqh of zakat. We're going to talk about, how to give zakat, who can give zakat, who doesn't need to give zakat, who do you give zakat to, who can you not give zakat to, etc., 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 inshallah. So there's a lot of detail that we got to get through. So inshallah, I don't want to keep people here any longer than you already have to be here for this session. So inshallah ta'ala, we're going to try to keep it as brief as possible. I'll touch up on differences of opinion here and there when I feel like it's absolutely necessary. But otherwise, just understand that we're trying to do a general overview of this topic, inshallah. And as I mentioned last week with the Fiqh of Fasting workshop that we had last week, I do also want to mention, can you guys see? Yeah. Can the sisters see the screen? You guys are good? Okay. As I mentioned with the Fiqh of Fasting workshop that we did last week, this presentation I have been given by some of my teachers at Qalam, so therefore I have to put a disclaimer that anything that I say in this session does not reflect Qalam as an institution or my teachers by any means. This is whatever I say is my own doing, okay, inshallah ta'ala. So we're going to talk about the definitions, wisdom, history, proof, who receives, conditions, consequences, zakatables. Right, it's kind of like a made-up word, but it just basically means what things do we have to pay zakat on, who pays, some common questions, etc. So first, let's talk about some definitions. It's always important to start with definitions, so they're all on the same page, inshallah ta'ala. Right? Now, zakat means linguistically, from a linguistic perspective, it means something that grows. Right? Something that grows. It's something that increases, and something that flourishes. It also means something that purifies. Right? Something that purifies. So قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ تَزَكَّى. قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ تَزَكَّى. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, successful indeed are those who purify themselves. And so, from a technical perspective, this definition of zakat is extremely important. Right? This definition of zakat, there has been a lot of thought and effort put into this definition of zakat by scholars. And the definition is تَمْلِيكُ جُزْءٍ مَخْصُوصٍ من مال مخصوص لشخص مخصوص لله تعالى. Right? So the giving of a specific portion of wealth, of a specific person's wealth, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Another way we can look at this definition is to transfer ownership of a specified person, to transfer ownership of a specified portion of wealth to a specified person, subject to the conditions that are specified by the Sharia, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we're not looking at all your wealth, we're looking at a specific portion of your wealth. And also, of this definition, the wealth that is given in zakat, like the actual money, the actual giving of the zakat, the actual currency or whatever it may be that you're giving in zakat, is also called zakat, right? So there's the concept of zakat, and then there's the physical aspect of zakat as well. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, take from the wealth, O Prophet, charity to purify and bless them, and pray for them. Surely your prayer is a source of comfort for them, and Allah is all hearing, Allah is all knowing. So zakat purifies us. Zakat cleanses us. It will purify their wealth. It will make the rest of their wealth halal for them. So tazkiyah is to purify the heart, which is a beautiful act, right? So it's a beautiful act for us to donate apart from our wealth. It removes love of wealth from our hearts, and it allows us to connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So zakat is a way of purification, not of only our heart, but also our wealth itself as well. So I want you to also consider zakat versus sadaqah, right? Zakat versus sadaqah. Terminology is extremely important. Imam al-Ghazali rahimahullah says the one who does not know terminology makes mistakes. And this is often the biggest precursor to debates that you see online. It's people not understanding terminology. And a lot of Islamic online debates could be avoided if people understood their terminology properly. So another word used for zakat in the Quran, and the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ also interchangeably uses with zakat, is sadaqah. Right? Sadaqah. Now sadaqah usually in our community means a voluntary act of charity. So from a linguistic perspective, sadaqah indicates a person's truthfulness. Indicates a person's truthfulness. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يَوْمَ يَنْفَعُ الصَّادِقِينَ صِدْقُهُم, that there's going to come a day where the truthfulness of someone will benefit, or the truthful will benefit from their truthfulness. So basically, sadaqah comes from sidq, which means truthfulness, and sadaqah is an act of charity to show your truthfulness towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Long story short, put your money where your mouth is. That's literally what sadaqah is, right? That what you say and being truthful, that you truly are doing for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you show it through your actions and through your charity. Put your money where your mouth is, basically. Now from a technical perspective, sadaqah, some say that sadaqah is synonymous with the word zakat, but there are two types of sadaqah. There's sadaqah wajibah and sadaqah nafila. Sadaqah that is mandatory, so wajibah would be mandatory sadaqah, and nafila would be optional sadaqah. All types of zakat are sadaqah, right? All types of zakat are sadaqah, but not all sadaqah is zakat. Understood? So, for example, a father feeding kids is sadaqah. Smile. But that's not zakat. Saying subhanallah, alhamdulillah, Allahu akbar, all sadaqah. But that's not zakat. Sadaqah is a broad general term. And zakat is a very specific type of sadaqah. So practically for you and me, what does this mean? It means that if someone says, give sadaqah to this, right? You should follow up and ask zakat or general. If, for example, let's say you are collecting funds for something, and someone gives you and says, I'm giving you sadaqah, you should follow up and say, what type of sadaqah are you giving me? Because if you give me zakat, I'm going to have to treat it differently than if you're just giving me general sadaqah. So what are the sadaqat al-wajibah? The mandatory acts of charity that one person must give. So there's zakat, obviously, which is the bulk of our discussion today. There's sadaqat al-fitr, also known as zakat al-fitr, which is the charity that every able-bodied person has to give, or able person has to give at the end of the month of Ramadan for each person in your household. So if you're a man and you have a household, you have a wife and you have a kid, and you have kids, for each person in your household, even those who are underage, you need to pay the sadaqat al-fitr, the zakat al-fitr, which is what? For each person, you pay the amount that it takes to feed a person for the whole day, which is about $10 to $15. So if I have six people in my family, and I'm the head of the family, then I will need to pay what? About $60, right? About $60 for sadaqat al-fitr. Now what's important is you want to give sadaqat al-fitr in advance a few days, especially if you're going to give it to a masjid, you're not going to distribute it yourself, because you want to give the masjid or the organization time to distribute it for you before Eid, because it needs to be done before the Eid Salah, right? It can't be done after the Eid Salah. So you need to actually give your sadaqat al-fitr before the Eid actually comes in, right? So this is why you want to make sure that you give it a few days before so that there's enough time for the distribution. Then there's the sadaqat al-wajibah, the adha, the udhiyah, right? The sacrifice for Eid al-Adha. This is only wajib according to the Hanafi opinion, right? According to the Hanafi opinion, this is wajib, but according to the other opinions, it is a emphasized sunnah, right? A very strongly emphasized sunnah mu'akkada. And number 4, a kafara, right? As we talked about last time for the fiqh of fasting, we talked about what kafara looks like, right? Or there could also be kafara for hajj and things like that as well. But if it's a kafara for fasting, you only do it if you are not able to fast, right? But there's also kafara expiations for other things like penalties during hajj and other penalties. So that is a type of sadaqah that will be wajib if someone commits a specific penalty. And with sadaqat al-wajibah, there are also specific places that you can distribute this type of sadaqah. Now, there's also sadaqah nafila. This is optional charity. And because of its also optional charity, you can literally distribute it to anything. You can use it to build a masjid, you can use it to build a school, to build a hospital. Any charity beyond the mandatory amount of zakat is called mandatory charity, right? Now, what are some wisdoms behind sadaqah? What is the wisdoms behind zakat? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, وَاللَّهُ فَضَّلَ بَعْضُكُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ فِي الرِّزْقِ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given some people more provisions than others. And so this is the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. By giving some people more and by giving some people less, the practice of charity is established in order to make the economy equitable. وَفِي أَمْوَالِهِمْ حَقٌّ لِلسَّائِلِ وَالْمَحْرُومِ. And giving a rightful share of their wealth to the one who is in need and the one who is deprived of wealth. So in our money, in our wealth, there is actually a portion that is attached to someone else's haqq. So we do not have haqq to all our wealth. Contrary to what Western values teaches you to believe, you do not have the right to all of your wealth that you have in your possession. You don't have the right to all of it, right? The common Muslim, the Muslim ummah, the world as a whole, there is a specific haqq that those who are in need, that those who are in the ummah are due because of your wealth. Right? So other wisdoms that we can find is to decrease the wealth discrepancy between the wealthy and the rich, to protect one's wealth from all types of calamities. So when we give sadaqah, we're protecting ourselves from calamities. From a metaphysical perspective, from a spiritual perspective. It helps the one who is in need. It purifies oneself from stinginess. We get less attached to the wealth. It also creates generosity within us. That no matter who you are, no matter how stingy you are, no matter how much you don't like to give, as a Muslim, you are required to give at least some, right? As otherwise you wouldn't give at all. And so it also demonstrates gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the wealth that He provided for you. You're showing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you are grateful to Him by using His blessings for His sake. And this is true wealth right here. When you use wealth for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or you use your blessings for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, know what? Know that you have been given a wealth or a blessing that is blessed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But if you use your wealth and your provisions for other than the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then that's actually a curse. It's not a blessing. Because now we have closed the doors of ibadah, and therefore it cannot be seen as a good thing. So it creates that generosity within us, and it creates gratitude. Now, practically speaking, I want us to think of zakat like a pressure valve. It's like a pressure release valve. It allows wealth to circulate within society, and it prevents the disparity between the wealthy and the poor before the economy explodes. And there are many societal and spiritual benefits to this, right? So it's not socialism, but it's also not so little that it doesn't make any impact. It's 2.5%. It's a good amount. And it maintains a flow of air so that everyone can live and benefit. Okay, some history of zakat. So previous nations also had an obligation of zakat. Now, as for the obligations of our legislation in our sharia, it occurred through three phases. The first phase was before Hijrah. Zakat was obligated as a general charity that the Muslims were required to give. They were required to give. The second year after Hijrah, the second year of Hijrah, zakat was obligated with the details necessary. So what to give zakat on, 2.5%, etc., etc., etc. Okay? Then in the 9th year of Hijrah, zakat was implemented as an actual state body. There was like an actual social welfare system. There was appointed agents to go collect it, to distribute it. It was treated as an actual governmental, entity. That's in the 9th year of Hijrah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also for the previous nations, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Baqarah, He says, وَإِذْ أَخَذْنَا مِيثَاقَ بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ لَا تَعْبُدُونَ إِلَّا اللَّهَ وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا وَذِي الْقُرْبَى وَالْيَتَامَى وَالْمَسَاكِينَ وَقُولُوا لِلنَّاسِ حُسْنًا وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتُوا الزَّكَاةَ. Right? So, and remember when we took a covenant from the children of Israel stating, worship none but Allah, be kind to parents, be kind to relatives, be kind to orphans and the needy, speak kindly to people, establish the prayer and give the zakat. So the zakat is not unique to our nation, but our sharia legislated it in a specific way. Now, what are some proofs that this is an obligation? Well, first of all, this is an obligation from the that has been proven by the pillars of Islam, 5 pillars, it's one of the 5 pillars. The Quran and Sunnah have a lot of ahadith and narration that talk about zakat and talk about establishing zakat and how many times the salah get paired with zakat, right? And then there's also ijma'. There's consensus on this, right? And ijma' basically means that there is no absolutely credible difference of opinion on this issue. And as a matter of fact, when Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anh, when there was a group of people of the Arabs who decided that after the Prophet ﷺ passed away, that we won't give zakat anymore. They denied the obligation of zakat. What did Abu Bakr as-Siddiq do? He went to war against them, right? He went to war against them. So it's called the Ridda Wars, right? So this is very serious. This is an obligation in our deen, which is why we need to take it seriously. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتُوا الزَّكَاةَ وَمَا تُقَدِّمُوا لِأَنفُسِكُم مِّنْ خَيْرٍ تَجِدُوهُ عِندَ اللَّهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ بِمَا تَعْمَلُونَ بَصِيرٌ. And the Prophet ﷺ, said in a narration that he gave the pledge of allegiance to Allah's Messenger, or Jabir ibn Abdullah, he says, I gave the pledge of allegiance to Allah's Messenger for the following: offering prayers perfectly, to pay the zakat, and to be sincere and true to every Muslim. These are obligations that we have in our deen. And there's also a lot of warnings, right? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will hold people accountable, will punish them severely. And I'll get to that more towards the end about consequences of not paying zakat. Allah will afflict people with drought who do not give zakat. Right? Wealth may remain, but the barakah is not there. We've all seen the person who maybe has, 7 figures, 8 figures, but they look like they're struggling, they're stressed all the time, they're not happy with their life. There's no barakah in that wealth. There's no barakah in that wealth because, it may have been attained through haram means, or they're not purifying it through charity, whatever the case may be. Now, obviously, if you're a millionaire through halal, means all nur ala nur, alhamdulillah, good for you, right? Make sure you donate to the masjid, inshallah. But nur ala nur, alhamdulillah, it's beautiful, no problem. But that charity is there, that 2.5% is there in order for us to purify that wealth so that there is barakah in it. There is barakah in it. Now, it goes without saying, right? This isn't a halal income webinar, but, please have halal income, inshallah. It makes your wealth go a lot further as well. There's a story from the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and Aisha. They were gifted an animal one time. And Aisha radhiallahu anha gave most of it away. And the Prophet ﷺ asked how much remains. And Aisha radhiallahu anha said, very little of it remains. And Rasulullah ﷺ, what did he respond? He said, no. All of it remains. Right? Now look at that perspective. That if a person gives something to someone who is in need, they will continue to be in the mercy of Allah as long as they're using it. Right? Another narration says that if a person gives a garment to a person who needs a garment, they will continue to be in the mercy of Allah as long as they wear that garment. Right? So, a lot of benefits to giving, alhamdulillah. So who pays? Who pays zakat? Well, first of all, let's talk about conditions. There are 3 types of people. By default, no one is obligated to give zakat. Okay? What do I mean by that? I don't mean like Muslims are not obligated to give zakat. No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that in order for you to give zakat, you have to reach a certain wealth threshold, then you are obligated to give zakat. Right? But nobody starts off just naturally, like as soon as I'm born, I'm obligated to give zakat. No, I have to reach a certain threshold, then I will be obligated to give zakat. And so by default, the one who is not obligated to give zakat will be eligible for zakat. By default. There's exceptions to this. There's a small list of people who are exceptions, which we'll talk about, that are neither eligible to give zakat or receive zakat. There are a small list of people that are like this. So, there are 3 types of people. There's ones who are obligated. Those are obligated to give zakat. Those are ones who are not obligated. And those are the ones who are not obligated to give zakat and are eligible to receive zakat. And then there's the exceptions. They're not obligated, but not eligible. Right? And that's a small list of people. So who is obligated to give zakat? So if all of these things are there, all the conditions are there, then this person is obligated to pay zakat. First of all, you have to be a Muslim. Right? The Sharia is not enforced on people who are not Muslim. Okay? So you have to be a Muslim in order to pay zakat. Alhamdulillah, all of us in this room are. And if you're not, come, inshallah. We'd love to have you. So you have to be Muslim. The second thing is they talk about is a freedom, where they talk about a free person, right? And no, we're not talking about a slave of Allah. We're talking about someone in the actual sense, right? Which is something that's not really applicable during our times anyways. But, it is a condition that the fuqaha mentioned, so we have to mention it. They have to be baligh, an adult. Okay, an adult. So an adult is what? We talked about it last week for the fiqh of fasting. Who can remind me what an adult is in Sharia definition? Reach puberty or 15 years old. Perfect. Good job, right? So whichever comes first. If you haven't reached puberty by the time you're 15 years old, then at 15 you will automatically be considered an adult. Now there's an asterisk here because there's actually a difference of opinion on this, because there's an usuli difference of opinion. For example, in the Shafi'i madhab, Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah, in the madhab states that zakat is due on wealth. Wealth is what is zakatable. So if the owner of that wealth has reached the level of wealth where they require to give zakat, even if a minor, zakat will still need to be given. It's not a common occurrence, but it's possible, right? A guardian might create a bank account in the child's name or something. However, the responsibility of the calculations will fall on the guardian. So this is the Shafi'i madhab opinion, that the adult is not a condition because zakat is given based on wealth, not necessarily based on the person who is owning that wealth. However, the Hanafi madhab states that no. That while the thing is that zakat is mandatory for people. That is what zakat is for. Yes, you can talk about wealth, but the wealth is not a sentient being. And fiqh and sharia applies to people, not things. So, not things that exist in a vacuum. So for example, if there's a gold mine, and gold is one of the assets that you have to give zakat on, but no one owns that gold mine. Is there zakat due on the gold mine? No, there's not zakat due on the gold mine. But if someone takes the gold, right, and now they're in possession of that gold, now zakat is owned. Right? Now zakat is owned, as long as they reach the minimum threshold. So zakat is an obligation on a person, and minors, they have no obligations. So therefore it's not required, right? And generally as well, Islam wants to protect the wealth of minors, right? It wants to protect the wealth of minors, right? So there's an usuli difference here, but but at the end of the day, I think inshallah ta'ala for our benefit and our sake, right, we'll just focus on the fact that you have to be an adult, inshallah. You also have to be aqil, right? Which basically just means someone who is sane, someone who's aware of the obligation of zakat and how to give zakat and is educated about zakat, someone who's actually capable of doing that. And the last condition is ownership of nisab for a whole lunar year. This is important. Lunar year, not the Gregorian calendar. Your zakat due date will be based on the lunar Islamic calendar, not the Gregorian date. So we want to make sure that is very, very clear, because the lunar year will change like 10 days every year. We'll go backwards. And yeah, maybe year 1 or year 2, there's not a big difference, but by year 5, 7, 8, 10, there's a huge difference about the time you are paying zakat. So you want to make sure you are keeping track of the lunar year, not the Gregorian calendar year. And their nisab, their wealth cannot be exhausted by any outstanding debts or deductions, which we'll talk about. And a year must pass by on that nisab without hitting zero. Without hitting zero, meaning like you're completely bankrupt, everything is gone, you're at $0. If you hit $0, then your calendar will reset. Now there are two types of nisab, and we'll talk more about that as well later. There's two types of nisab. There's nisab, which is the threshold. The definition of nisab is what? The threshold for zakatable assets at which zakat becomes due. Now, with those two types, there is the gold nisab, there's the gold standard of nisab, and there's the silver standard of nisab. Okay? The gold standard of nisab is based on the dinar, which is a gold coin that weighs about 4.374 grams at the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu, and you need 20 of those. Okay? So, we're going to do an exercise here real quick. Let's do an exercise. Can everybody pull up this website that I have on the screen? Goldprice.org. This is how you're going to calculate the real-time nisab right now, okay? Because you might have some websites that give you an estimate or say from like 2 months ago what it was, but this is how you're going to calculate the real-time nisab right now. So on your zakat due date, you will, and we'll talk about how you find that, you will go to this website and you will find out what the nisab is and see if you're over the nisab. So is everybody on the website? Got it? So now when you go to it, you'll see on the bottom here, at the top as well, it shows gold, US dollars, and ounces. Change the ounces to grams. Change it to grams. What does it say? How much US dollars is 1 gram of 1 gram of gold? 70.05. Good. So now we're going to go to our calculator, and we're going to do 70.05 times, how many grams did we say? What's on the screen? Times 4.374. Right? What did you guys get? I got 306.39. Right? Yes, hold on. So we're working through this step by step. So we're there so far, right? Now you'll times that by 20. Okay? Because that's how much dinar is the nisab based on the gold standard, which is how much? 6,000, about 6,000. Okay, we'll just do it, we'll just make it easy. About 6,000, 6,127.97. Okay, so about 6,000 for gold. Now, the interesting thing is during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, gold and silver were pretty close to each other. There wasn't such a major difference. However, over time, over a century and a half, it has significantly changed. Gold has gone up significantly and silver not as much. So that's why there's a huge discrepancy of what the gold and the silver standard is. So now let's do the same exercise, but with the silverprice.org. So go to silverprice.org. And this website, for some reason, doesn't have grams. It just goes straight to kilograms. So we'll use the ounces, right? We'll use the ounces. What does it say? How many ounces, or how many US dollars is 1 ounce of silver? 24.31. And this is a dirham, a silver coin. So 24.31. And then now we'll multiply that by what's on the screen, which is in ounces, 0.108 equals, what do we have? About $2. $2.62, or $2.63 if you round up. Now you'll multiply that number by 200. You will multiply that number by 200, which is about $525, right? We'll make the math easy, 500. So the gold standard nisab is 6,000 and the silver standard is 500. Okay? Let's just make the math easy for us, inshallah ta'ala. Now, here is where it gets tricky. Which standard do we go with? How are we supposed to know which standard do we go? Because there's a dramatic difference between the two, right? And so this is first of all, this is a very important slide. Okay? Take a picture of this slide, note this slide, whatever you need to do, because this is how you're going to calculate your nisab on a yearly basis. Okay? This is how you'll calculate it. Now, the scholars have debated this issue extensively. Which standard of gold or silver do we go with? Which standard of nisab do we go with? One group says that $300 or $500, in our case, $500, this is from 2020, so that nisab price on April 2020. So focus on just the 6,000, 5,000 right now. The price of 500, somebody that has $500 in savings, that's not a lot, right? In our current modern context, that's not very much. Somebody might actually need that $500. That person may themselves even actually be zakat eligible by having only $500 in their savings to their name, total, okay? So therefore, these scholars will say that $6,000 is a much significant amount more. If there's any emergencies, if there's any desperation, that $6,000 will be able to survive them maybe a month, maybe if you are really smart with your money, maybe 2 months or so until they can get back on their feet. So we will treat that $6,000 as the nisab, the gold as the nisab, right? However, the ones who argue for silver, they say what? You have to remember there's a lot of debts and deductions that take place before you have to give zakat. So this is keeping in mind that the person is able to pay for their home, they're able to pay for their food, they're able to pay for their tuition, they're able to pay for their kids, they're able to pay for their car, whatever bills they have, they're able to pay for their credit card bill, whatever they have. Then what's left over is that $500. So there's actually, if you think about it, they're doing good, right? They're doing pretty good. They are able to make themselves survive. They might be living paycheck to paycheck or maybe close to that, but they're not necessarily in need of zakat, and that might be better placed somewhere else. So they argue for the silver standard, right? Which one should we use? Honestly, it's tough because even my own teachers disagree. I didn't know what to say, so I called some of them up, and it was literally split 50-50 with my teachers. Some of them say gold, some of them say silver. I think this is a rahmah. Personally, I just think this is a rahmah. This is a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Maybe it is best to look at somebody's individual circumstance and see what makes sense for them. But because this is an obligation of our deen, we don't take it as a joke. We don't take it as a joke. So if someone can do the silver, they should do the silver, right? And as a matter of fact, when you do the silver, what's 2.5% of 500? That's quick math, yellow. That's $12.50, right? That's actually not that much. $12.50 that you give once a year. Like if you're looking at it from that perspective, it's not that much, right? It's not going to cause a significant hit for someone. That's like a sandwich, right? So, and if that's the case, then silver can be used as well, right? So either gold or silver, honestly, the difference of opinion is pretty split. So look at your own individual circumstance, but be honest with yourself and push yourself. Because this is an obligation of our deen, we don't want to be sitting before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and saying, I made excuses. And we want to see, can I do this? Can I actually do this? And try your best to fulfill that obligation as best as possible. Wallahu ta'ala alam. Now let's talk about debts, right? So first of all, there are two possibilities. Now, after you have calculated nisab, what you're going to do is you're going to figure out if you own any debts at this time or not. And the debts are broken down into two types. There are, ASAP payment and scheduled payment. If you owe money, these two possibilities are there. Either the payment is being done in an aggressive fashion. You are trying to pay it off ASAP. For example, someone has a charge on their credit card that needs to be paid immediately. Otherwise, it incurs interest. Interest is haram. Interest is predatory. We don't want to be involved in that. Therefore, you are trying to pay off that debt as soon as possible. ASAP. If that is the case, and Sharia actually encourages us to do this, we want to save ourselves from debts as quick as possible, right? So if that's the case, you will deduct the full amount of that debt from your assets. You will deduct the full amount of that debt from your assets. Now, if it's a scheduled payment, and it's being paid off based on a agreed upon preset schedule. For example, someone purchases a house, 30 years to pay it off, right? And for our argument's sake, we'll say there's no interest in paying it in 30 years. Allahu Akbar. What a beautiful world that we live in, right? No interest in this world, in our fantasy world that we live in. Because you don't deduct interest from your deductions. You don't deduct interest or, for example, money or debt from gambling from your deductions. Those don't count. You still have to pay that, right? And you will incur sin, but that's your problem, right? Sharia did not tell you to do this. So you won't deduct it from your debts, technically speaking. So actually, this still does apply from our fantasy world because we don't even consider interest to be part of the debts that we are deducting from our zakatable assets. But this type of debt is treated more like a contractual relationship than it is a debt. So therefore, the scholars actually have a difference of opinion. Some say that you will schedule it you will deduct the amount that you owe for that year, right? However much you owe on that year, that scheduled payment debt that you have, that is what you will deduct from your zakat. The other opinion is just that 1 month. On the day, on on your zakat due date, you will deduct the month of the payment, right? Wallahu ta'ala alam. Now, Imam Shafi'i, rahimahullah, interestingly enough, he says debts are not deducted at all. Because he says Sharia does not give you leeway for your bad choices, right? You don't just put yourself in bad situations and then make your way out, right? This is actually very useful for those because America's society is interesting. It rewards debt. You know this, right? It rewards debt. So there's like billionaires, but they're all in debt. All the billionaires are in debt. And if they do all their deductions, they might not even be eligible to give zakat. Rather, they might actually be eligible to receive zakat. And these are people that are basically cheating and hacking the system, right? So Imam Shafi'i basically wanted to put a stop to all that, right? So he's like, no. You guys don't get leeway for your bad choices. But this is a pillar of our religion, and the warnings are severe. So, inshallah ta'ala, in order for us to be more in line with the spirit of zakat and trying to give as much as possible to those who are in need, for scheduled payments, it might be best to take account the month and not the year, right? The month and not the entire year. Wallahu ta'ala alam. Now, what are types of debts? There's a lot of types of debts. There's prices of goods that are purchased. For example, you buy a laptop and you put it on layaway, and you have not paid for it yet. That money can be deducted. Any rent that is due. So for example, let's say that my zakat due date is April 15th. I know I talked about Gregorian calendar, right? But just for sake of this example, just to make things simple, it's April 15th. Now the rent bill was given on the 13th, so 2 days before your zakat due date, and it's due on the 16th. It's due after your zakat due date. You can deduct the rent from your zakatable assets. Same thing with utility bills. You will also deduct any wages that you owe employees. So again, April 15th due date, and you pay wages to employees on April 13th, right? You can deduct. You can deduct that. You can deduct anything that you are going to, that you have given, technically you've already deducted it because it's already been given to your wages. Now, if it is a future payment when it comes to wages for employees, because it's a future payment, then you cannot deduct that. You cannot deduct that, okay? So that's treated differently than rent. You guys understand that, right? It's treated differently than rent. If you are someone who pays people, or you're a boss and you pay employees directly from your own wealth. You can also deduct mahr, right? You can also deduct mahr. So for example, if a husband said that the wife will get 30K and has not paid that yet, he can deduct that every year. However, with that being said, the Hanafi fuqaha, they say that if someone promises a ridiculous mahr, that's your problem. Okay? That's your problem. You don't get to offer $1 million mahr and then deduct that from your assets every year. This is the mahr in which someone sincerely intends to actually pay. Right? To actually pay. So the opinion is what? If there's an understanding that he's going to pay it anytime soon, right? Then he will deduct it. But if there's understanding that he won't pay it, right? That he won't actually pay in his lifetime, then first of all, that's very problematic, and you won't deduct it, right? Essentially, why? Because the fuqaha are telling us what? Don't play with Allah's deen. Don't play with His deen. Be serious. Any outstanding personal debts, outstanding taxes, things like that, commercial loans, etc. Not the interest. Like I said, you don't deduct sin. You only deduct what is permissible, what is halal. So if you have gambling debt, again, like I said, the scholars say you cannot deduct that. Now, when it comes to taxes, taxes are not a replacement for your zakat. Okay? You'd be surprised how often we get this question. That if somebody gives taxes to the government, that doesn't mean you've paid your zakat. Taxes are completely separate, right? Pretty sure they're haram anyways. But anyways, let's not talk about that. Anyways, focus on zakat. But so, I got you. I got you. So taxes do not stand in place of your zakat, right? But they can be deducted in your zakatable assets. Does that make sense to everybody? Right? You got it? Okay. If there's ever any confusion, if I say, okay, actually, I'm just going to say, is anybody confused? And if you're confused, raise your hand, okay? So is anybody confused so far? No? Alhamdulillah. Okay. There's a question? Yeah. Yeah. So whatever taxes that are outstanding. So basically, you haven't paid your taxes yet, right? Um, because you can't deduct it unless you know how much you owe, right? Yeah. Yeah, Habib. Yeah. Yeah. Just the next month. Just the next month's rent. So that was talking about a debt that you're in a contractual obligation with, like a mortgage, for example. So this example that I gave is about a mortgage. And then even this, I preface that it's probably better if you just do the month opinion. Because the spirit of zakat, look, there's a general principle here. When it comes to differences of opinion, you want to ask yourself, what, in my circumstance and scenario, falls more in line with the spirit of zakat? And the spirit of zakat is what? We want to circulate wealth to those who are in need. So focus on that, right? And based on your current circumstance, you will kind of be able to determine. So because the 1 month you're deducting less and yet you'll end up paying more zakat, that falls more in line with the spirit of zakat, which is why I encouraged it. But if someone takes this opinion, they're not at fault, because this is a legitimate difference of opinion amongst the fuqaha. That's all I was trying to say. Now, when it comes to receivable debts, okay, this is something that's important also to mention. Debt that someone owes you, right? Debt that someone owes you. There are two things to keep in mind: dayn qawi and dayn da'if. Okay? Dayn qawi means that it is a strong likelihood that you will get that money back. There's a contract that was made, you know that it's going to come, and you know what's going to happen. The person that you gave to has a high credit score, is trustworthy, etc. Okay? You will count that as your own wealth, because it technically is your own wealth. So for example, if I give someone $1,000 and I know, because we have a contract, he's a trustworthy person, he has a good track record, he has a good credit score, when my zakat due date comes, but he still hasn't given it back to me, but I know he will, I will add that to my zakatable assets. Not deduct, I will add that. I'll say this is my money, because it's my money, right? It's technically my money. But then there's also dayn da'if. This is a loan that you have very little hope in it being repaid. Like, this person does not pay that back his debts. He just likes to take money, he likes to dip, but you're just like, whatever, here's the debt, or here's the loan, and if you pay it back, great. If you don't pay it back, then whatever. I'll try to treat it as charity or something. I'll just forget it. Right? You have no hopes that this person's actually going to return it. That person, you will not add it to your zakatable assets until you've actually received it. Okay? So it's a little bit subjective, but that's how the fuqaha treated it. Yes, Habib. It's not necessarily within the year, no. It's just that you have high hopes that it's going to return to you, and you have a contract. So the contract, for example, if I give you like 10K, but I tell you that you have to pay back in 10 years, right? I will count that 10K every year in my zakatable assets. Yeah, every year. Because it's my money. I have that 10K. It's technically mine. So this is where there's a difference of opinion, right? The 10K, either you can wait until you receive it, right? And then pay all the zakat retrospectively, or you can add it to your zakat assets and pay it once a year, right? And therefore, which I would recommend the latter, because then you don't take a massive hit at one time. Ali, you had something you want to say? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. This is only for dain qawi. So this is only for the dain that you know you'll return it back. Why? Because in the Sharia, this is an important distinction. I probably should have made it already. In the Sharia, if you demand that debt back, it is yours. Does that make sense? Right? If they can pay, right? But that wealth essentially is yours. And this problem right here is the same problem that we have with 401ks, which I will get to, inshallah, right? But this is just the general principle that we have right now. Yes, Habib. One more question and then we'll continue, sorry. For the debts that are owed to you. Yeah. Yeah. Well, no. There's not vice versa because they're treated differently. There's debts that are owed to you and there's debts that you owe. Those are treated completely differently. Yeah. Okay, we'll talk. Sorry, there was a hand here, I think. No hands here? Okay, inshallah. Sorry, online, forgive me, I'm not, okay, actually there's no questions online. Alhamdulillah. Everyone online is either asleep or paying great attention. Okay, let's talk about conditions for the wealth, right? So first of all, the wealth must be zakatable, right? The zakatable wealth must be greater than or equal to the amount of nisab, right? Amount of nisab. And the lapse of a lunar year. Remember, we said the lunar year, your lunar calendar date is when your zakatable date is going to be, or zakat due date is going to be determined. Now, some important terminology before we get into the zakatable assets. There is, what is zakatable? And so zakatable essentially is anything that you have to pay zakat on if it reaches nisab. Then there's non-zakatable and part of basic needs, right? There are things that are non-zakatable and they're part of our basic needs. And then there's non-zakatable but beyond one's basic needs. So what is zakat applicable to versus not applicable to? These 7 categories is what zakat is applicable to. That's it. That's the final say. Nothing else. So gold, silver, any currency that is in use. And by the way, for gold and silver, there's difference of opinion. But generally speaking, anything. It can be in any form. Coin, jewelry, raw utensils, etc. Okay? Gold, silver. Gold and silver. It does not matter what purpose. It can be for investment. It can be for novelty. It can be for personal use. So Hanafis, they say that it's for personal use. Other the Jamhur say things that are for personal use are not going to be used towards your zakat. But both have their arguments and they have their good points. Now, how do we determine if a piece of jewelry is gold, right? Or silver? In order for the object to be zakatable, that you have to give zakat on it, or add it to your zakatable assets, it has to be 50% pure gold or silver. At least 50% pure gold or silver for it to be a zakatable asset. White gold, by the way, is 75% gold. Okay? So white gold will be treated as a zakatable asset. There is no zakat on expensive material no matter their value. Precious stones are not zakatable. If you have $1 million diamond, good for you. You don't pay zakat on it. Platinum, emeralds, rubies, none of that you will pay zakat on. Only gold and silver. Right? Why? The Sharia said so. Okay? That's it. Now, business goods. And obviously we talk about currency. Currency is pretty simple, right? Currency is any fiat currency that we have, and cryptocurrency too. Let's just get rid of that while we're here. Cryptocurrency, you'll just go to your cryptocurrency account, you look at the value, you just pay zakat on that, 2.5%, right? Or you'll add it to your zakatable assets. Sorry. Business goods. Now, if your precious stones are not personal use and you use it for business goods, that's different. Okay? So if your diamonds, you have a diamond. Your husband was very generous and he gave you a $1 million diamond engagement ring and that's yours. Good for you. Congratulations. You don't have to pay zakat on it. Now, if you own a diamond ring store and that's your business, then you will have to pay zakat on whatever merchandise that you have. Now, anything bought with the intention of reselling is considered to be zakatable. Listen carefully to this. Inshallah ta'ala, I'm going to give you an example about homes. And I will say 3 things. After this, inshallah, you won't need to have any questions about any other business goods because the principles generally across the board will apply the same to any business goods. Okay, so listen very carefully. There's 3 scenarios. Number one, I bought a home with the intention of reselling it. I'm going to flip this house. And so the ruling with that is that any time you have bought something with the intention of reselling, it is a business good, and therefore it is a zakatable asset. Does not matter what the product is. Now let's say this house was worth $1 million. Okay? You're going to give zakat at 2.5% on that 1 million. Okay? Now, second scenario, I bought a home with the intention of living in it. The ruling is any time you buy something for the use of your own personal benefit, it will not be zakatable. Gold and silver excluded. Right? Gold and silver excluded. Any gold and silver, even those for personal use, will be zakat added to your zakatable assets. And like I said, there's a difference of opinion amongst the Ahnaf and the Jamhur. Now the third scenario is I bought a home with the intention of renting it out. The ruling is whenever you rent something out, it is not due on the product, but it's due on the rent that you collected. So if I collected during my zakatable year rent, however much I collected, I will add it to my zakatable assets. And if your rental income comes to your account, then you already have that accounted for your zakat. But if you have a separate account, then you need to add it to your total zakatable assets. So rental income technically falls under currency, right? Now this is because the Sharia generally encourages Muslims to own land. So if you buy land and you build homes on that land, the general ruling is you don't pay zakat on any of that. Now the moment you start profiting off of that, so for example, the crops that you might grow on that land and the fruit that you sell, you'll give zakat on that. You're renting out homes, you'll give zakat on that. But ones that you own for yourself, you don't give zakat on any of it. Right? You don't give zakat on any of it. Anybody confused? Yes. Hold on, Abdurrahman, you just walked in like 30 seconds ago. What are you what are you confused about? يلا تفضل حبيبي. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that soon, inshallah. How to figure out your zakat due date, right? That's going to come in that category, inshallah. Okay, the last three we won't talk about. Agricultural produce, livestock, treasure troves. Unless any of you guys are pirates or farmers, we won't necessarily talk about that one right now. Yes, Zaid? Like your personal property? Not the one you live in. Just the one that the one that you rent out. You will only give zakat on whatever rental income you make. Right? Because you're not selling the house for any business good. You are renting it. And the same applies to any business good. For example, if I rent out a wrench, for example, I will never pay zakat on the wrench. I will pay on the money that I make off renting out the wrench. But the moment that I own a wrench store, and now my business is that I sell wrenches, and I got the best wrenches in town, then all the wrenches in my store will be something that I add towards my zakatable assets because it's basically future income in sitting. Does that make sense? As long as it's personal use, yes. But if you're going to use it as a business, or you're going to sell it as a business, then basically you will count it towards your zakatable assets. So for example, if someone is like a real estate guru and they have like 5 homes that they've bought to resell, right? And a year passes and it's their zakat due date time, okay? They will have to give zakat on all 5 of those homes, right? Now you might be thinking like, that's a lot. Yeah, well, Islam doesn't reward stupidity either. You make decisions, that's it, right? It encourages us to what? Islam, Sharia tells us don't be dumb. But the Sharia also encourages a Muslim to own property as much as possible. So own land, own homes, right? Rent it out if you want to, use it for personal use. But the moment that you use it for reselling and for flipping and for as your business good, then it will be treated as a business good, right? Yeah, one more follow. A business in your home. That has nothing to do with anything. Yeah. That has nothing to do. It's just, yeah. Assalamu alaikum. Yeah, Ahmed. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, if you switch your intention, you don't have to do anything retrospectively. Once you switched your intention for that, that's going to be your new intention moving forward. You buy an apartment, and in 5 to 10 years, you know you're going to sell it. It will still not be treated as a zakatable asset until you actually put it on the market. Right. Okay, moving on. Sorry, any sisters have questions? Okay. All right. Now let's talk about the actual lapse of a lunar year, right? So there's an important difference of opinion here. First of all, Imam Abu Hanifa, right, again, has 1 year passed or not? I need to have your guys' undivided attention for this. Okay, listen carefully. So Abu Hanifa, his opinion is, the Hanafi school opinion is, the year starts when your total wealth first hits nisab. So essentially, you're going to find out, what did we say? Let's just use the gold standard for argument's sake, right? 6,000. Okay, let's just say 6,000 for the gold nisab. You will go and check your statements, your documents, whatever you need. You will find out, when have I, and collect all my zakatable assets together, when have I reached past nisab? When have I reached this $6,000? That day, in accordance to the Islamic calendar, will be your zakat due date. Now, after 1 year, your total wealth, and I highlighted total for a reason. Total because you are going to collect all your zakatable assets together. This is according to the Hanafi opinion. Your zakatable assets together, and you're going to combine them as one thing, basically. So all the gold you have, all the silver you have, all the currency you have, all the stocks that you have, all the business goods that you have, you will add all of that together. If all of that together goes past nisab, you will start your lunar zakat, your lunar zakat date, and then you will wait 1 year. Okay? And then, doesn't matter what happened during that year. It increased above nisab, decreased below nisab, as long as you don't hit 0. Once you hit 0, you have to go back to step 1, and you have to wait till you reach nisab again, and then that will be your new zakat due date. Once you reach your zakat due date, you will find out, am I still above or past nisab? If you are above nisab, then you will give 2.5% on all your wealth. And if you are not past nisab, then you just won't give anything that year. And you'll wait until the next due date, as long as you don't hit 0. Now the Jamhur, the Maliki, Shafi'i, and Hanbali school of thought, they say that the year starts when you first hit nisab for each category individually. Each one individually. So basically, they were kind of joking about it earlier, you're going to have to make a whole Excel sheet. Right? And you're going to have to figure out all these different categories. And the year is calculated separately for each zakatable category. Okay? And then the year restarts every time the category dips below nisab, not at 0. So as you can see, that can get very complicated very quickly. Right? But it's possible, right? If people can make spreadsheets for their fantasy football leagues, they could probably make spreadsheets for the zakat too. So it's possible, right? I'm not going to say it's impossible, but for the sake of ease, inshallah ta'ala, go with the Hanafi opinion, right? You guys are like, this guy likes the Hanafi opinion a lot. I wonder why. I wonder what's so special about the Hanafi madhab. Wallahu alam. I guess we'll never know. So let's give an example. So we're calculating zakat. You hit the 1st of Ramadan and you received a paycheck that was $8,000, right? And I passed nisab, I have no debts, everything is great. Ramadan, 1st of Ramadan 1st will now become my zakat due date. I will note that date somewhere. I will write it on my notes in my phone. I will write it on a sticky note, hang it on my wall. I will put it in my calendar, whatever it is. I will note that date. Then I will wait till Ramadan 1st of the next year. The 1st of Ramadan of the next year. Then I will see, am I still over nisab? I give zakat. If I am under nisab, I don't give zakat. Nothing happens in the middle of these two dates that will have any effect, increase or decrease, will not have any effect, except you hit iflas, which is 0. right? Then you will restart all over again. Okay. Is anybody confused? No. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead. Let's give everybody a second. I need a drink of water. MashaAllah, you guys are doing great. I think we're almost done, inshallah. Not too much left. And don't worry, I'll talk about 401ks, Roth IRAs, all that good stuff. We love that stuff. But we need the framework first, so that we're understanding the framework. Okay, are we good on this slide? Tamam? Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So the day before your zakat due date, you get $60,000. So the next day is your zakat due date, right? Alhamdulillah, nur al nur. You gotta pay zakat. Yeah. So because it's not based on every dollar that you've owned for the year, right? Because if that's the case, that's gonna be impossible to keep track of, right? Because that means every paycheck, every dollar that you come into contact with throughout the year, you're gonna have to make a spreadsheet that basically determines each individual dollar's zakat due date, which is going to be really hard for us to do, right? And the Sharia is not, asking us to do that. Yes? Yeah. No. Mm-hmm. Yeah. 60,000 is the zakatable asset. So, first of all, there's a difference of opinion on that, right? The opinion that I'm mentioning would say that no, you would have to pay on the 160. Yeah, right? So basically, what the Hanafi is saying here is what? The Hanafi is saying is as soon as you reach Nisab, no matter what happens throughout the year, right? You will wait until the next zakat due date. Once you reach the next zakat due date, you'll do your calculations, and then based on however much you have in that moment, you give 2.5% of that. Does that make sense? Yeah. Tamam. Yes, Musa. Best estimate. Go to your bank statements, go to things like that. Alhamdulillah, bank statements, they go to like 10 years back. Have a best estimate that you got, inshallah, and try your best. It is possible. It might be tedious, but it is possible, right? So just take an hour or so out of your day, hour and a half, figure it out, and then make your best estimate, inshallah. Yes, Ali. Net worth. Yeah, no, correct. So he was mentioning that net worth also, usually sometimes they take account into the home that you live in, right? Which is why I usually avoid saying that, right? But she was just mentioning it as, just as an example. Yeah, yeah. So you want to, net worth, yeah, it is a term, but we do want to make sure that we're actually only focusing on zakatable assets, right? Good, alhamdulillah. Yes, Ahmed. I'll talk about how you can pay in Ramadan if you want to, even if your zakat due date is outside the month of Ramadan. I'll talk about the way that you can do that, right? But Sharia perspective, no, you do need to find out what your zakat due date is. Because hypothetically speaking, let's say that you pay zakat, right? And then you have an arbitrary number for an arbitrary date or artificial date that you created. And the next year, right, your zakat due date comes along, and any increase in your wealth you didn't pay zakat on, right? Because you created a 5 months gap for yourself for zakat. In those 5 months, Allah forbid, something happens to you, there's zakat that was due on you that you did not pay, which can be, have consequences in the akhirah, which is why we want to be careful of that, right? So if you know what your zakat due date is, no, don't create an artificial due date. If you don't know, still, go and make your best estimate. But I will talk at the very end, inshallah, I just want to get through the important stuff first, about how someone can still pay zakat in Ramadan, even though the zakat due date is not in Ramadan, right? Because there's kind of fiqh technicalities there that you need to keep in mind. So, yes, last one and we'll move on, inshallah. Go ahead. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So the question is if someone is ignorant about zakat and they did not know, like for example, for like 10 years, they didn't pay their zakat, but they had reached nisab for those 10 years, what does that person essentially do, right? That's the question, correct? Okay. You will have to pay retrospectively, right? So that person will have to, I know it's tough, right? But you will have to pay retrospectively. That person will have to go to each individual year, if they're able to, right? Try to go to each individual year and find out how much zakat did I have to pay that year, right? And then add all the zakat years up. And it might be a big lump sum at first, but you don't have to pay it in lump sum, right? That's the thing, that's the beauty with zakat. Technically, you don't have to pay it in one lump sum. So for a person like that, if they're trying to kind of like catch up, right? The way to atone for that is basically to just set yourself a monthly payment schedule, right? Go to one of these relief organizations, just set like a monthly payment, forget about it, and then inshallah ta'ala, eventually, you will cover that zakat, inshallah. Does that make sense? Yeah, tamam. Okay, moving on. So conditions for giving zakat. What are some conditions? First of all, you must have intention. You must have the intention to give zakat. You cannot do it retrospectively, right? So you don't have to say it. It's probably better not to say it. Don't go up to someone and be like, I'm giving you zakat, right? Don't make them feel that way, right? We want to give honor to those as well. But in your heart, you just say zakat, right? So, for example, let's say I'm going, I'm walking and I see a Muslim who is in need, and then I give them some wealth, and then I did not intend zakat, right? I did not intend zakat at that moment, but then I am, an hour later, I look at my calendar and I'm like, oh, my zakat due date is today, right? And I'm like, oh, that $100 that I give, I'll count it towards my zakat. Can I do that? No, my intention was not zakat from the first. It has to be the first intention that you're zakat. This is an obligation. This is fard, right? So the intention has to be clear there. You can't do that in salah. You can't retrospectively pray dhuhr. Like it doesn't work like that, right? You can't pray your tahajjud and be like, I'm counting it as fajr. No, you can't do that. The fard is the fard. There has to be perfect intention, sincere intention with what you are doing, right? With the fard, the obligations that you are doing. The second thing is you need tamlik, right? Now, there's a difference of opinion on this, and we'll talk about it when we talk about what fi sabilillah means. But tamlik essentially is a transfer of ownership, that a person must have complete ownership of that wealth, right? And this is why, generally speaking, zakat money cannot be spent for things like digging a well, right? Difference of opinion, but just stick with me. Just stick with me. Because there's no ownership over the well. It's public property. Both the rich and the poor can benefit from the well. And that is not jaiz in terms of zakat. So again, what do we want to remind ourselves when we're giving zakat? What fits better in the spirit of zakat? And that is to make sure that the poor actually are increasing in their wealth as best as possible. Or those who need zakat are increasing in their wealth. We need to make sure those who are in need are actually getting the money. So when giving zakat, one also must make sure that it is given to a Muslim, right? Voluntary sadaqah can be given to anybody, but it needs to be given to a Muslim. Now, can you give to someone to give on your behalf? Yes, you can, right? But zakat cannot be given on your behalf, meaning that somebody can't pay your zakat for you, okay? Somebody cannot pay your zakat for you, but you can give someone your zakat to pay it for you, right? So if you give it to like a relief organization or someone overseas, etc. Now, what's important is that your zakat is not considered given until it's actually given, right? So this is why if you're going to do this, you want to be able to find out if there's a way to kind of track it. So if I give someone $10 and they keep it for a year, my zakat is not done. That $10 is not done. It needs to actually be given. Now let's talk about some consequences of denying zakat. First of all, denial. If someone denies the obligation of zakat, this person has left the fold of Islam. Because the proofs are clear, there's ijma' on this, there's no difference of opinion on this. This is an obligation of our deen. We don't deny obligations of our deen. Now, if someone doesn't deny that this is an obligation but just doesn't do it anyways, it's a major sin, but they're still in the fold of Islam. But it's still a major sin, right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in this verse, He very clearly condemns strongly the one who doesn't pay zakat. The one who hoards their gold and silver, instead of giving it to the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they will have a grievous punishment. On that day, it's that the gold and silver will be heated up by the hell's fire and used to brand their foreheads, sides, and backs. May Allah protect us. And they will be told, this is what you hoarded up for yourselves, now feel the pain of what you hoarded. Right? So this is a very strong consequence. We already talked about Abu Bakr Siddiq and the Ridda wars. So here we see there's no denial in this verse. There's not denial that the zakat is not obligatory, but there was negligence. And so there still also was a massive consequence. And Rasulullah said, anyone whom Allah has given wealth, but he does not pay its zakat, then on the day of resurrection, his wealth will be presented to him in the shape of a bald-headed poisonous male snake with 2 poisonous glands in its mouth, and it will encircle itself around its neck and bite him over the cheeks, and they say, I am your wealth, I am your treasure. And the Prophet ﷺ recited, the verse, وَلَا يَحْسِبَنَّ الَّذِينَ يَبْخُلُونَ بِمَا آتَهُمُ اللَّهُ مِنْ فَضْلِهِ. That, and let those, not those who withhold that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has bestowed upon them of His bounty. Now let's talk about distribution. Who is eligible to receive zakat? There is a verse in Surah At-Tawbah that tells us very clearly on who is eligible to receive zakat. إِنَّمَا الصَّدَقَاتُ لِلْفُقَرَاءِ. So the first thing is the fuqara, right? Someone who is under nisab and not able to pay their bills. That's the definition of fuqara. They're not able to pay for their basic needs and they're under nisab. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions wal masakin. The fuqara and the masakin are different in definition. The fuqaha have a definition of fuqara, which is someone who is under nisab and not able to pay for their basic needs. And the masakin are basically the ones who are rock bottom and have nothing at all. Right? So the masakin are kind of like the zero. Another way that people define it is the fuqaha kind of say that the fuqara are the ones who usually don't ask people because they might have a little bit of wealth just to get by to survive, but not necessarily to fulfill their basic needs of a home and things like that. And the masakin are usually the ones who are so desperate that they have to ask people. Right? So that's kind of like how they can also define it as well. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالْعَامِلِينَ عَلَيْهَا. And these are the ones who are the zakat collectors. These are the ones who administrate the zakat. They are part of the system of the people who manage zakat administration. It is jaiz to give to these people as long as they are doing it within an official capacity and under the guidance of, Islam, an imam, a qadi, a judge, someone who is very qualified for this field. Even if they are wealthy, you can still technically give to them, right? But again, what do we want to say? What do we say? We want to make sure that we fulfill the spirit of zakat as much as possible. So if you're able to give your zakat somewhere else, then do so, right? Then do so. Now, how much do they take? Right? The reality is there's no actual defined percentage in any verse or any hadith, right? Giving us a clear percentage of how much the zakat administrators are allowed to take for zakat. However, the fuqaha do say that they should not take more than what is needed to provide for one's family. So some scholars suggest a maximum of 12.5%, right? So this is generally the advice that we would give to organizations and relief organizations to keep their zakat administration costs to under 12.5%. If you do find an organization that has their zakat administration costs under 12.5%, that's a good sign that they're being very God conscious of their zakat, right? And 12.5% may seem like a lot, but that is what is needed to administer the zakat. Now, someone might say, why not just pay from general funds? Why not just pay from general funds and not use the zakat for administrating zakat? That's idealism. I'm going to keep it real. And you're not more ideal than the Quran. I'm just going to be honest, right? The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, there's a story of he was distributing spoils of war. And someone obnoxiously comes to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and tells him, be fair, Ya Rasulullah. Right? Be fair, Ya Rasulullah. Now, when you say that, this companion, radiallahu an, has went too far in the way that he spoke to the Prophet, because that's the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Of course he's going to be fair. So it's foolish for us to try to be more ethical than the Quran. It's foolish for someone to tell the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, all due respect to the companions, I'm not trying to say anything against the companions or anything like that. There are examples, radiallahu anhum ajma'in. I'm just taking this as a general aspect, right? Please don't misunderstand my words. Please don't misunderstand as I'm being disrespectful to any companions. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy on them all. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be pleased with them all. But for us, it would be foolish for us to try to be more ethical than the Quran. So the Quran told us this is how it's practical, this is how it's sustainable. Is by having zakat administrators and by paying them from the zakat. And so this is the ethics of the Quran. So it is the most sustainable and it is the most practical way of doing it, right? And then there is the وَمُؤَلَّفَةِ قُلُوبُهُم. There is the ones who are, what they say, they're in need of winning over. Their hearts are in need of winning over, okay? You want to make them feel welcomed. And this was done by Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. The Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam would give new followers that just accepted Islam, right, some zakat so that they feel comforted by that Islam, right? Or somebody whose iman is getting weaker, they'll give them some wealth so that their iman strengthens and gets more confident, right? Now there's a difference of opinion about whether this should be done with non-Muslims or not, okay? So does winning people over include non-Muslims or not? One opinion says, no, it does not include non-Muslims. And another opinion says, only if you are really confident that that non-Muslim will actually be won over. Essentially meaning someone that you've been giving da'wah to for a while. They're just on that brink. They're right there. And you give them some zakat in order to basically kind of like win them over, right? Wallahu ta'ala alam. But generally speaking, we don't give zakat to non-Muslims. You can give as much sadaqah if you want, as you want. As much voluntary sadaqah as you want, charity to non-Muslims, but zakat is reserved to Muslims so that we have a system to strengthen the Muslim ummah, right? To strengthen the Muslim ummah. Okay, skip that. وَفِي الرِّقَابِ, right? And those who are in bondage, we can skip that, not relevant. وَالْغَارِمِينَ, these are people who have debt, and as a result, they do not own nisab, right? These are people that are in debt and they do not own nisab. So an example is, someone has 5K in possession, or 6K in possession, but they have like 10K in debt. They can receive zakat in order to help them with this. And fi sabilillah. Fi sabilillah. The last category, not the last category, second to last category is fi sabilillah. Now what does fi sabilillah refer to? This is the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, generally speaking, the majority of the fuqaha of the classical fuqaha, the early fuqaha of the Muslim ummah, generally said that this is jihad fi sabilillah faqat. Right? Qital faqat. That's it. It is fighting for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for the sake of Islam, right? That if there is the army and they are in need of wealth in order to protect the Muslims, in order to strengthen the Muslim army, then zakat can be given to them, right? Now, as the years went on, other scholars broadened the category of fi sabilillah to expand beyond this, right? But still kind of limiting it. So in the sense of, for example, they broadened it to the hajji, because they're also fi sabilillah. Someone who does not have access to their wealth when they're going to give hajj, because classically speaking, that wasn't the case. You can't access your bank account when you're at hajj. You have your wealth at home. It's all physical. You have to carry basically whatever you can take to hajj, and that's the wealth that you have. So someone doesn't have access to wealth at home. They can be a billionaire, but they don't have access to their wealth at home. So while they're in the act of performing hajj or traveling for hajj, that's considered fi sabilillah, and so they can be eligible for zakat to get them by until they get home. Another is the tulab al-ilm, the students of knowledge. The students of knowledge, right, who do not have access to wealth. Those are also people that are zakat eligible. Now, then the jamhur, right, which means in this case, for example, for this case, the ahnaf, they only limit it to those three. The general opinion of the Hanafi school is jihad fi sabilillah, right? The hajji or the talab al-ilm, right? So that will be for the ahnaf. For the other madhahib, they will kind of refer it to as any good cause for the sake of Allah can be considered. Doesn't necessarily mean you should give it to that, but it can be considered. Now, generally speaking, again, when it comes to difference of opinion, this is a rahmah, right? Now, we want to focus on the spirit of zakat, and the spirit of zakat is to try to distribute wealth to the poor as much as possible. However, technically speaking, if we have a very strong Islamic institution, like a masjid, or an academic institution, an ilmi institution that's teaching students of knowledge and things like that, and they're about to go bankrupt, they're about to lose the building because of lack of finances, and they're given the opportunity to take zakat to help them out, then inshallah khair, right? Like, don't die, don't kill the institution for that sake, but in an ideal scenario, if you are able to not take zakat and you're able to survive off general funds, an institution or a building should not take zakat for that purpose, right? Should not take that. It would be encouraged against, and they should try to direct it towards those who are actually in need of zakat, right? So that's kind of the way you should treat that, inshallah ta'ala. And then there's wabin as-sabil, right? The traveler. And same thing with the haji, basically example. They don't have access to their wealth until they go home, so they can take zakat when they are in the sake of travel. Now there's a discussion about whether this is relevant in our times or not, but it's still, this is what the verse says, so it's important for us to go through the whole entire verse as well to know who is eligible for zakat versus who is not. Because let's say, an example, we're in a position where that does happen to us, right? Where, credit card gets declined while we're overseas, right? It happens, right? That's actually, I know someone that's happened to. They went overseas and their credit cards weren't working. And so now they couldn't pay for anything, right? And he called me, he was like, what do I do? I said, go to, alhamdulillah, he was actually in Saudi, right? I said, literally, just go to the local, bank or ministry or whatever it is, and just ask for zakat. And he took some zakat, and he survived off it for a week, and then he came home. Alhamdulillah, right? It happens. It is a possible scenario that has happened before, and I've known it happen, seen it happen before, right? Now, what's interesting is, I don't know if it's going to be here. Okay, it's not here. Now, what's interesting is, how many of these categories do you have to give to when you give your zakat? The Hanafi opinion is that you only have to give to one of these categories. Right? You don't have to distribute it equally to every category. Right? The Jamhur, the other fuqaha, say that no, it needs to be given to each category divided. Right? Again, my advice, just take the Ahnaf opinion on this. Right? All jokes aside, it makes life a lot easier. Right? It makes life a lot easier. So who is not eligible for zakat? Your family up or down. Meaning what? Your usul and your furu'. Your usul are anybody that is above you in lineage, and your furu' are anybody that is below you in lineage. So your usul is your father, your grandfather, your great-grandfather, your mother, your grandmother, your great-grandmother. Anyone above you in lineage is not eligible for zakat. Is not eligible for zakat. Your furu' is your children, your grandchildren, etc. You are not allowed to give zakat to those individuals, right? Now, can a husband give zakat to his wife? Yes or no? What do you think? No, you can't, because it's already your responsibility to take care of her. So you don't get to give her zakat, right? Now, can a wife give zakat to the husband? There's a difference of opinion. The Shafi'i say yes, and the Hanafi say no. And actually, you shouldn't, right? Because it might be self-serving, and it's not in the line with the spirit of zakat. Because if the wife gives zakat to the husband, what is that husband going to do with that zakat? Use it to support the wife, right? Ideally, right? If he's a good husband, he's supporting his wife, right? So that is so therefore it's not fully in line with the spirit of zakat, right? Now there are extreme scenarios where that could be, something that is considered, but in general, that it shouldn't be done if there is better alternatives. Now, any other relatives can. Your uncle, your father-in-law, your mother-in-law, your brother, your sister, right? You can give to them. And there's also double reward for maintaining ties, right? Double reward for maintaining ties. You would be surprised how many people have family overseas. Raise your hand. Allahu Akbar. Look at that. You will be surprised how many of your family overseas, that's not your immediate family, is actually zakat eligible. Because what do we say? Like, for example, if we're going with the gold standard. If we're going with the gold standard, nisab is $6,000. Anybody under nisab is zakat eligible. Okay? Anybody under nisab is zakat eligible. So, Habib Yusuf, our local Masri, what are we at now? What's the Egyptian pound out now? To 50? Right. 6,000 times 50 is 300,000 pounds in Egyptian currency, which is a lot. Most people don't have that. I'm telling you. Most people in Egypt don't. Am I wrong? Most people in Egypt don't have that. So you would be surprised how many of your own family members might be zakat eligible. So if there's a way to inquire about it, if there's a way to find out, then go give your zakat to them. Right? That would actually take precedence over anybody else. Your family members would be the main priority to try to bring up as much as you can, inshallah. If you don't have a system, it might be good to establish a system. Talk to your family. How can we establish the system of figuring out who in our family is zakat eligible and who is not, right? So those who are zakat eligible or those who can give zakat can give to those who are zakat eligible. I'll give you what my family does. I'll give you an example of what my family does, right? We all have a center trusted person that we know, that we all love, that we all adore, that we all trust, and that's my grandma, right? Allah yahfadha. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserve her. That's my grandma. Anybody in my family that needs zakat will tell her. And she'll write it down, she'll make a note of it, she'll keep it in her record. And anybody that wants to give zakat will give it to her, and she will distribute it, right? And she will say, I need this much zakat. If anybody that is looking to give zakat, give me this amount, right? So that I can distribute it to other family members that need. So now only one person in the whole entire family of like 70, 80 people is in charge and knows who is zakat eligible and who can give zakat, and therefore everybody's honor is maintained, nobody feels embarrassed, nobody feels disrespected, and everybody's happy, right? And alhamdulillah, right? That's a good way to do it as well. Yes? Like kids giving to their parents zakat? No, they are not, no. Okay, the family of Banu Hashim. Who's the family of Banu Hashim? The family of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? The family of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam are not eligible for zakat, right? Now, one might say, why? Because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said so. That's it, right? He said, my family does not take zakat. My family does not eat from zakat, right? From sadaqah. Now you can give gifts to the Prophet, the family of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this is from the truthfulness of the Prophet. This is actually a wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because then no one can claim the Prophet was corrupt. No one can claim that he did favoritism to his family. No one can claim that at all. Right? And if you look at the lifestyle of the Prophet as he even preferred to live a humble lifestyle, although he technically had access to a lot of wealth. He would just give frequently. He would give significantly and frequently, right? Now, there is an opinion in the Hanafi and the Maliki school about Banu Hashim that they say that if the situation is so dire that they're basically going to die if they don't take zakat, then they can take. Because at the end of the day, saving a life is more important than this aspect of it, right? Now, how do you support Banu Hashim, right? Usually, that was done with the Bayt al-Mal, right? The Bayt al-Mal, which is something that Umar ibn Khattab established, which is basically kind of like a community waqf, a community endowment people can give to. It's not considered zakat, but you can sustain society through that, right? Through endowments and things like that. So Banu Hashim can be sustained through that. So anybody from the lineage of the Prophet Muhammad can be sustained through that. Now, how do you find out if someone is from the lineage of the Prophet Muhammad? If you believe them to be, it's plausible that they are, then khair, no worries. It's not like we have to go track people down and, confirm for sure and things like that. I know there's a whole thing where people just kind of claim it nowadays. I don't know why, because it actually comes with more restrictions than it does benefit, right? So there's restrictions. with what you can do as from the lineage of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but there's not really much benefit, right? The benefit is what? The benefit is like, yes, anybody that is from the family of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we should give them a certain level of honor and respect, purely for the reason that they are connected to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. However, what I mean by benefit, I mean spiritually. The fact that you're from the lineage of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam does nothing to you in the akhirah. If you're a bad person in this life, you are going to be treated accordingly in the akhirah. That's it. Whether you are connected to the Prophet ﷺ or not, it does not matter, right? Because many of us are connected to the Prophet ﷺ even greater by just following his sunnah, right? By just following his sunnah. So, this is not one of those things you play games with, right? Like, don't just claim things. If it's not true, it's not true, and it doesn't matter. If you're following the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, inshallah, you'll be with him on the day of judgment in paradise. That's what we want to do anyways. And your non-Muslims are non-eligible for zakat as well. Okay, let's do some examples applying theory. So example 1, somebody has the nisab amount, right? And this is a little bit of an outdated presentation, so just take it. We'll consider this the silver standard or something, whatever. The nisab amounts, they're past nisab. 2nd of Ramadan, 1420, Muhammad possessed $5,800, thus he has become sahib nisab for the first time in his life. Now throughout the year, this amount kept increasing. And then the 1st of Ramadan comes, the next year, 1421, Muhammad possesses $6,000, zakat will be due on $6,000. So this kind of addresses your question earlier, right? Now second example, Aisha possessed $6,480. After deducting $800, she has exactly enough to be sahib nisab for the first time. But throughout the year, this amount increased and decreased, and it even went below the nisab at one point. But then in the 1st of Ramadan, the next year, Aisha possessed, I should say 2nd of Ramadan, or 1st of Ramadan, yeah, because you pay it the next day, right? Aisha possessed $5,700, which is above nisab, and zakat will be due on that $5,700. Now the third example is Omar possessed nisab, and he becomes sahib nisab for the first time. Throughout the year, this amount decreased. And so the next year, when zakat due day comes around, Omar possessed $1,500, and zakat will not be due on him. Zakat will not be due on him. And example number 4, Zayd possessed nisab, and he has become sahib nisab for the first time. And then throughout the year, this amount actually decreased to 0. Then in the 7th of Rajab, Zayd possessed nisab again. So his zakat year has reset, and in the following year of Rajab, Zayd possesses $5,900, zakat will be due on him, right? Nisab, he has passed nisab, zakat will be due on him in this case. Okay, now let's talk about some common questions really quickly, okay? So stocks. Okay, there's difference of opinion on how to treat stocks. First of all, it depends on whether you are trading it or whether you are using it for long-term investment. If you're a trader, you will just basically take the cash value of the stock and you'll pay 2.5% of that. You will just take it right away and add it to your zakatable assets. Okay. Now, if you're using it for long-term investment, this is where there's a difference of opinion. And a lot of these things, a lot of these modern things, there's going to be difference of opinion, right? Almost all of them, because of what? Because these are modern things, and so the fuqaha are using usul from the past and applying them today, and so therefore people are going to have different approaches and different understanding of those usul, and so the fuqaha will have difference of opinion in this regard. So one thing that you can do, and this is the more complicated way, is you will kind of have to look at each share, or not each share, but each stock that you are invested in, depending on how many shares that you have, individually. So let's say, for example, you have the market value of one share, which is $100. You will basically need to look at the fact sheet of that share, or of that stock, and see which one of them relates to manufactured goods, raw materials, and cash. So let's say we have a $100 share. $30 of that share goes towards the building, $30 goes towards machinery, $15 for manufactured goods, $15 for raw materials, $10 for cash. Only the last 3 are zakatable assets out of the 100. So only 40 of that 100 will be considered as a zakatable asset, not the full 100, right? Not the full 100. Okay. Now, the way that modern fuqaha have made this a little bit easier is they've given us a rule of thumb. Okay. Now, we can sit here all day and talk about how they came up with this rule of thumb, but just trust that there has been a lot of research to get to this rule of thumb. The rule of thumb is what? Basically, 30 to 40%, right? And because we're trying, this is an obligation, and because we're trying to fulfill the spirit of zakat, always take the higher number. Okay, so we'll go 40%. 40% of your stock, of your long-term investment, will be what you will basically give zakat on. Another way you can do it is when you go to your Fidelity account or your Amana Mutual account or whatever it is, you see that cash value, and you just give 1% of that instead of 2.5%, right? Why is that? It's because when you own a stock, you're essentially owning a share of a company, okay? You essentially own a share of a company. And so therefore, not everything in that company is a zakatable asset. So you have to treat that accordingly based on how much of that company that you own, right? That's the complicated way. The other opinion, which I would recommend, because you end up paying a little bit more and you're fulfilling more of the spirit of zakat, is you just pay 2.5% of the cash value on in your investment account, in your cash value account, etc. Right? Which one's correct? Honestly, both are legitimate issues of ikhtilaf. Both have strong arguments, and therefore, whatever fits best with you. If you're one of those people that understand the stock market very well, understand finances very well, and you want to do that math, you want to do the spreadsheets and all that, more power to you, right? That opinion is there for you. Now, what about pensions and funds, 401ks, IRAs, Roth IRA, etc.? Do I have to give zakat or not? There's two possibilities. One, and by the way, cryptocurrency we already covered. What do? You just treat it as normal currency. Okay, simple. Either you have invested optionally into that pension fund or that 401k or whatever it is, or involuntarily. If it's an involuntarily thing, meaning that the company either takes a portion of your wealth out to put it into this fund, or they do it as a gift, right? Like it's just like an added benefit, right? Then you will only give zakat on that until when you receive it. When you receive it. If it's voluntarily, so I'm putting money into a 401k, Roth IRA, etc. There's three opinions, okay? Listen carefully, okay? One opinion is you don't have access to that account, right? You don't have access to that account. So therefore, because you don't have full unrestricted access to that account, we can't claim that it's yours. You don't have to pay any zakat on it at all. That's opinion number one, right? Opinion number two is the opposite of that opinion. At the end of the day, it's in your name. And at the end of the day, you will have access to that account at some points. So you will give zakat on that amount, right? You will give zakat on the amount. The third opinion is somewhere in between, which inshallah ta'ala is what I recommend to apply, right? The third opinion is what? Is that, first of all, we have to acknowledge that it is in your name. You have some ownership. And technically speaking, if you take it out before you are allowed to, you will have to pay taxes, you will have to pay a penalty, but you still will receive something. So essentially what you will do is you will calculate how much would I receive post taxes and penalties, and then add that to my zakatable assets. So opinion number one is you don't pay at all. And the analogy they use is that if someone has a treasure and they lose it and they forget where they buried it, the zakat is not due on them. And then if they find it again, then zakat will be due on them. That's the analogy they use for that one. But what's the problem with that analogy, right? You know where your 401k is, right? It's not lost. You just don't have access to it, right? Or full unrestricted access. Second opinion is you pay on the full amount. And the third opinion is that in between. You will deduct your taxes and penalties, and you will pay on whatever left is 401k. Now, a Roth IRA is treated a little bit differently because you have access to your contributions. So let's say I have contributed $10,000 to my Roth IRA so far in my life, right? And alhamdulillah, it's doing well and it's grown to $20,000. That $10,000 that I contributed, I have unrestricted access to it because it's already been taxed as income tax. And so you can take that out unrestricted, no taxes and penalties. Any profits you can't take out. You have to, there's penalties if you take it out before your retirement age, okay? So you will have that 10,000 plus whatever penalties you have to pay on the profits, on the $10,000 profit, and then you'll add that together and then count it towards your zakatable asset. Make sense? Okay? Tamam. We talked about mortgages already. We talked about precious stones. We talked about investment properties as well. Yeah, alhamdulillah. Now, real quick. First of all, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, He says, وَرَحْمَتِ وَسِعَتْ كُلِّ شَيْءٍ, that His mercy encompasses everything, right? فَسَأَكْتُبُهَا لِلَّذِينَ يَتَّقُونَ وَيُؤْتُونَ الزَّكَاةَ وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ بِآيَاتِنَا يُؤْمِنُونَ, that I will ordain mercy for those who shun evil, they pay zakat, and they believe in our revelations. Now this is interesting. Where's salah? Why doesn't Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala specifically talk about salah here? Because in this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about how the mercy of Allah is encompassed on the one who also shows mercy to people. Ar-Rahimuna yarhamhum ar-Rahman. Irhamu man fil ard, yarhamkum man fis sama. The merciful are those who are shown mercy by Ar-Rahman. Be merciful to those on earth, and they will be shown mercy from whom is above the heavens. When we give zakat, we are showing mercy to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's creation, and therefore Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is showing us mercy in return. So take our zakat very seriously, inshallah ta'ala. And now I want to address the question that Ahmed had earlier, which is, what if I want to give my zakat in Ramadan, but it's not my due date? This is how you would do that, okay? Listen carefully. Ramadan rolls around, and you want to give zakat in Ramadan. What you will do is you will calculate your zakatable assets, right? And then you will find out if you're above nisab, okay? And then you'll do the 2.5% and all that. And then however much you owe in zakat, you can give that in the month of Ramadan before your zakat due date, okay? However, the condition is you're not done. What happens next is when you reach your due dates, what will you have to do? You'll have to recount everything and see, did I go above the original total of my zakatable assets from Ramadan? So let's say in Ramadan, I had $100,000 of total zakatable assets. Okay? MashaAllah, I'm doing well. You have $100,000 of total zakatable assets, post deductions, everything. And then you do your deductions, you do your accounts, 2.5% of that you can give to charity in the month of Ramadan. Right? You can give to charity in the month of Ramadan. Now my zakat due date comes up. And it's not the month of Ramadan, it's another month. My zakat due date comes up. When my zakat due date comes up, I should already note down somewhere that in Ramadan I gave $100,000 in zakat. Okay? I gave $100,000 in zakat. Now when my zakat due date comes up, it's higher. My total zakatable assets amount to $120,000, for example. Okay? You will have to give zakat on $20,000 on your zakat due date because you've already given on $100,000. Does that make sense? Okay? So you're not going to give zakat again on $120,000 because you've already technically done that retrospectively. Or not retrospectively, but in advance. And so you will pay zakat on a $20,000, that extra wealth that comes in. Now what if you go below $100,000? Then alhamdulillah, you gave more zakat than you were due, and that's better anyways. You should always overestimate your zakat. This is actually the practice of the companions. This is the practice of the companions. They overestimated their zakat because it was very serious. They did not want the consequences of not paying their zakat, so they always overestimated. So if you overestimated and you gave more zakat than you were actually due, then alhamdulillah, you don't have to worry about anything. As a matter of fact, you get more reward. All right? Good for you. And that's how you would do that. Does that make sense? Anybody confused? We got it? Tamam. All right. Now one last thing. Can you give zakat with your credit card? Right? With your credit card. Can you give zakat with your credit card? Technically speaking, yes, you can give zakat with your credit card. Yeah. However, one thing that you want to consider is that the credit card fees do not count towards your zakat. So if you're going to pay with your credit card, if there's an option, if you're going to give to like, Islamic Relief or Human Development Fund or something, usually there's an option where it says, I want to cover processing fees, right? Check that off. Say yes. Because the processing fees are not going to count towards your zakat. Or if that option is not there, then overestimate so that you do cover processing fees, right? Another thing as well is you don't want to give any zakat with conditions. Don't give zakat with conditions. So you can't give someone zakat and be like, I'll give you zakat if you help me out this way. You should not benefit from your zakat, okay? So now it begs the question, what about like credit card points and things like that you might be getting from zakat, or tax cuts or tax breaks and things like that? That is treated separately. You're not benefiting from the zakat that you gave. That's the point, right? Okay, I think that was everything. So is there any questions? It's almost 10 o'clock, so yes. Yeah. Sorry, can the sound, I couldn't really fully hear the question. Can we make sure we're not talking over here? It's a mic.
Okay, if a person is living on rent,
Yeah.
and saving money to buy a house,
Yeah.
and the money is there in the bank for past 2 to 3 years,
Yeah.
is he supposed to pay zakat on it?
Yes. Yes. So any money in your bank that's just sitting as currency will have to be something that you add to your zakatable assets. That's a good question. Yes, Ali. Anybody online that can't see, there's a ball being thrown around for the mic, so I don't know, but bismillah.
There's a lot of modern, fatawi on fi sabilillah,
Nah.
specifically around Islamic organizations and specifically around masajid
No.
in North America or in non-Islamic countries, because there's no government support aside from tax-free, tax receipts. So what is your opinion on giving your zakat to the masjid?
Institution, the masjid.
Institution, for instance.
I think an institution should only do it if they absolutely need to. So avoid it as much as possible, but if it's the brink of you either closing the institution down or taking zakat, then take the zakat. At the end of the day, we want to keep the institutions alive, right? So I don't think it should be the default, but I do think that that option is there, because again, what's the spirit of zakat, everybody? To help uplift the poor as much as possible, right? So that's what I would recommend. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Yes. Are we throwing the ball around, or I don't know what's going on? But just so everybody can hear the question.
So I have 2 questions. The first is, does the zakat have to be given as money? Like, for example, for donations for Gaza, for the
Good question.
the organizations.
Yeah. Zakat does not have to be given in currency, no, but it has to be given in material, right? And it should be given in material. So if someone buys like a bag of rice and then distributes that as zakat, that would fulfill the obligation. Yeah.
Okay, so my second question is, if I know my zakat due date, but I, for example, want to delay this a little bit to give it when I go back home because people overseas need that more. Is that haram to delay it, or is it possible?
Delaying it is a little bit problematic, yes. Paying it in advance is better. The only reason why I say delaying is problematic is like the example I gave to Ahmed earlier. If you delay it and on the, Allah forbid, on the off chance that something happens, right, and you return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala before you paid it, that can be held against you on the day of judgment, right, and in the grave. And we want to avoid that as much as possible, right? So generally speaking, I would not encourage anybody to delay it. Yeah. Wallahu a'lam. Yes, Ibrahim. Or actually, let's go here first, and then we'll go, because it makes a shorter distance for the ball, I guess. Good.
I have 3 questions.
Bismillah.
My first question, Bismillah, was, so what if you're getting like scholarship money for school and loans as a student, and then, well, can you answer that one first, actually?
What if, well, okay, so
If
if
you're
you're getting
getting
scholarship money
yeah.
and loans for, so
And
is
then
the
you
money
have-
going directly to your bank account?
Yes.
It is.
Yes.
Then yes, you have to pay the account.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And the second question was, how can I word it? Oh, if you found gold, right,
Yeah.
on the street, and you're like, oh, wow, a bracelet, and you're asking around, like, is this yours? Is this yours? No one's saying, it's not mine, and you keep it until you can find the person, that the gold belongs to.
Yeah.
Do you have to pay zakat on?
No, because your intention is not owning that gold. So you don't own that gold. That's not part of your assets at all. This is somebody else. It's just being placed in a certain location. So, for example, if someone has like a bunch of gold bracelets and they're keeping it at my home, right? It has nothing to do with me. I don't own that gold in the first place, right? So it's only on what you own. Any other third question?
Yeah, and my last question was gold that is gifted to you and you wear it.
Yes.
Do you have to pay zakat on that?
Yes.
What if you don't know how much, like they just gifted it to you, you don't know how much it costs?
Well, it's not about the cost, it's about the weight, right? So you would have to weigh it, and then you would go to that goldprice.org, basically, and you would figure out the weight of the gold and how much it would cost, and then you would add that to your zakatable assets, which addresses one of the questions that was online. And also another thing, okay, so there's a question that arises here. So let's say, for example, there's a husband and wife, and the wife doesn't have an income, right? But she has a good amount of gold, for example, right? So she has gold that reaches nisab, but she doesn't have currency to actually give zakat, right? What should someone do in that case, right? Classically speaking, they would recommend that you sell part of that gold so that you have currency, and then you do that, right? And that's part of the taqwa of separating our hearts from material wealth and sacrificing for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now somebody might say, oh, but gold increases in wealth, and who cares? Shut up, right? Like it's just like we want to have taqwa in Allah, we want to be conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we want to do it fi sabilillah. Now another scenario that could happen, another possibility that can happen, and listen very carefully, this is, a fiqh technicality that could be used in order for someone, for a sister who doesn't have an income or the husband is providing for the sister, to be able to pay zakat. Now this scenario is this. Let's say the zakat time comes around, the zakat day comes around in the year, and everybody is putting the calculations together to figure out what the zakat that they have to give, right? And so, let's say, for example, my wife finds out that she needs to give $100 in zakat. Okay, she finds out she needs to give $100 in zakat, but she doesn't have $100 to her name, hypothetically speaking. Okay, $100 to her name. What I can do as a husband, now I can't say, because it's not allowed for me to say, don't worry, I'll pay for it. I'll pay for it on your behalf. I can't do that. What I can do is she'll still own the zakat. As a matter, she'll have to pay the zakat to me because I paid it on her behalf, but she still have to pay the zakat, right? But what I can do as the husband, right, and what you should do if you're in this scenario as a husband, if you're going to be a good husband, is you say, oh, you own $100 in zakat, here is $100 as a gift. Wink, wink, basically, right? And then she now owns that wealth. It's hers. I have nothing. I have no say to it. It's completely in her control. And then she pays zakat with that wealth.
For the gold that's gifted to me, you said I can sell it, right? Or I can sell
Sell
some
a portion
of it.
of it, yeah. Which
Or-
I know you're not really gonna want to break apart part of your bracelet and stuff like that, but
Right.
So that's why I'm saying the second scenario is probably more applicable.
So,
Yeah.
or, because I don't have a husband, so I can go to my dad and be like, hey, daddy, you want to give me an Eid gift, like this
Yeah.
much money, and then I can use that money to pay off my nasib.
I mean, you can obviously explain the fiqh technicality, but you just have to make it clear that the intention of the person that's giving it to you, they have to give it to you as a gift, right? That's it. Yes, Ali.
Sorry. Even if it's worn, but
Even if it's personal use, yeah.
but many of the other scholars, if it's worn as an ornament for women specifically,
No.
as long as it's worn within the year, then there's no.
That's true. You're right. You're right. There are differences of opinion on it. But like, I don't know, man. I don't know. It's tough. It's tough because like, we'll talk more. We'll talk more later. I don't want to do this in front of everybody, but basically it just has to do with how convinced are we with certain arguments and things like that. Anyways, we'll talk. We'll talk, inshallah. But there is a question here about what is any payment over the zakat amount. So if you overpay zakat, what it will be considered as? It would just be considered as sadaqah nawafil, right? It would be volunteered. It would be considered as voluntary sadaqah that you will be rewarded for. Any other questions? I'll take two more, inshallah. Yes, Ahmed, go ahead.
When you said selling your stocks, or like if you sell your stock, or I think this is like business goods in general, do you pay like once you sell, or do you pay like what you've accumulated and that like?
No. You will just pay, like, if you go to your investment account, whatever that dollar value you see on that day is, that's what you will pay zakat on. Right? No, it's not about if you sell and things like that. No, it's not. Sister had a question over there. Yeah.
Two questions. The first one is, if a woman is married and she lives with her husband away from her parents, and her parents are in need, can she still pay zakat to them?
She can't pay zakat to them, but she can give them a gift. She can give them as much sadaqah as she wants. So when I say zakat, I mean the obligatory 2.5%, right? That can't be given because there's a specific intention and a specific category for that specific one, right? But just general charity, you can give as much of that as you want to your parents, to your brothers, to your sisters, to your sons, to anybody, right? Non-Muslims, whoever you want. But in terms of the actual obligatory 2.5%, no, right? That specific one, no.
And the second one was, I missed the first part. Can you quickly explain zakat al-fitr?
Yes, so zakat al-fitr is the obligatory charity that that you have to pay for every member of your household at the end of the month of Ramadan, which accounts for about $10 to $15 per member of your household, even minors. Okay, so let's say that I have 6 people in my household, me, wifey, 4 kids, right? 4 kids are all minors. I will still have to pay the 6. I'll still have to pay zakat al-fitr as the provider of the household for all 6 members of my household, right? Now, there's a difference of opinion about whether the wife should pay for her own or not, but generally speaking, it kind of doesn't really matter that much because if she's not able to pay for her own, then the husband can step in and pay for it on her behalf, specifically with zakat al-fitr. Not with zakat, right? Specifically with zakat al-fitr only, right? But you want to pay that, and usually masajid or organizations will announce like a week before Eid that we're now taking zakat al-fitr because it needs to be distributed before Eid, right? It needs to be distributed before Eid so that you technically are not supposed to go to the Eid Salah until it's distributed. So you want to give people enough time in advance to give it, right? So you don't want to come on Eid morning and be like, how can I give my zakat al-fitr? At that point, it's like, bro, it's too late, right? So you want to give it as soon as you hear that masjid announcement, that organization announcement, whatever it is, you give it right away, inshallah. Is that clear? Tamam. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, you just do the 2.5%. Yeah. And you had a question over here? Yeah.
Where do we get all these details about zakah and like so much detail?
Yeah.
During the Prophet Muhammad.
So all the classical stuff like gold, silver, business goods, agriculture, animals, sheep, and stuff like that, then that is all like from the time of the Prophet ﷺ, the Quran, the Sunnah, and early fuqaha and things like that. The more modern things like 401ks, cryptocurrency, investment accounts, and things like that, that is from modern fuqaha that are using the usul of the past to try to give rulings about modern issues. Does that make sense?
But these Imam Hanifa and Shafi, they have different versions?
No, it's the same evidence. It's the same evidence. They're just interpreting it differently. Right? And this is actually almost always the case, right? So there's a famous book by Ibn Rushd. It's called Bidayat al-Mujtahid, right? It's a book that most madrasa students would study. And in that, Ibn Rushd, who is a Maliki scholar, who specializes in usul, specializes in principles of fiqh, he basically breaks down every mas'ala of fiqh and the different usul and the difference of opinions and how they came to that opinion, okay? How they came to that opinion. Now, in like Kitab al-Salah alone, like the chapter of Salah, there's over like 120 masail, right? 120 masail. Out of all 120 masail, one of them, where they use different evidence. The other, they use the same evidence, they just had a different interpretation, right? Or a different level of how to categorize the strength of different narrations and things like that, right? But at the end of the day, it's the same evidence. And so that's why we trust those who are qualified in those fields to interpret those evidences for us, right? And then we come up with the rulings from that. Allah ta'ala alam. There was one question here online about if I am from the family of Banu Hashim, am I allowed to give zakat to my brother in the Maliki opinion? I don't know the Maliki opinion, right? I'm just going to preface that about this specific issue. But from the Hanafi perspective, if you are the family of Banu Hashim, you would not be allowed to give zakat to your brother because he's also the family of Banu Hashim, right? So you wouldn't be in that case. There's another question about the zakat distributor, right? Essentially, if you have something that's not currency, like gold, sheep, or something like that, they have to give zakat on, right? What quality of that do you have to give, okay? So the general rule here is quantity over quality. Okay, the general rule here is quantity over quality. So if you're a zakat collector and Ibrahim has 40 sheep and I'm the zakat collector and I'm coming to Ibrahim, right? I won't collect the worst of the flock or the best of the flock. I will find something that is in the middle. An average sheep, I will take that one sheep out of the 40 as the zakat from Ibrahim, right? Does that make sense? So it's more of a quantity over quality thing. You don't want to give the worst thing, but you also don't want to give the most quality thing either, right? You want to give something that's average, that is a general standard. Wallahu ta'ala alam. Okay, if you have any other questions, I'll be here. Please feel free to come up. Brothers, because I usually just hang out with you guys afterwards, if you guys can please leave the priority opportunity to the sisters to come up and ask questions, I would appreciate that, inshallah, because otherwise they just end up waiting on the side for forever. But jazakallah khair, everyone. Inshallah, you guys were able to learn something new today. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us a blessed Ramadan. Subhanallah wa bihamdik. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين ربنا تقبل منا إنك السميع العليم وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك التواب الرحيم واغفر لنا وارحمنا يا مولانا إنك الغفور الرحيم ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وصلى الله على سيدنا وحبيبنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.